Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who just wouldn't quit? This woman sent us a formal written demand to clearly mark our boundaries, so we decided to follow her instructions to the letter, and you will not believe the chaos that followed. This whole mess started around a year and a half ago when I bought a condo unit in what I thought was a quiet, low-drama building in the suburbs. The building itself is a converted warehouse from the early 1900s that a developer transformed into loft-style condos back in the late 90s. There are only 8 units total, which made it perfect for someone like me who wanted the benefits of ownership without dealing with a massive complex. The building operates under what's called a micro-association. Basically, we have shared expenses for things like the roof, exterior maintenance, hallway lighting, and the small parking lot out back. Each unit owner pays their share monthly, and we handle everything through a simple agreement. No formal board, no elaborate rules, just 8 reasonable adults splitting costs and making decisions together when needed. We'd meet once a year at someone's unit, usually with pizza and drinks, to discuss any upcoming repairs or improvements. It was casual, friendly, and drama-free. My unit is on the 3rd floor with big windows, exposed brick, and original wooden beams. I work from home doing graphic design, so the natural light and open space were exactly what I needed. My neighbors were all pleasant. There was an older couple on the 1st floor who'd been there since the conversion. A young family with 2 kids had the other 1st floor unit. 2nd floor had a single woman who traveled constantly for work and a guy around my age who was rarely home. The other 3rd floor unit belonged to a couple who were both nurses working opposite shifts, so I'd see them coming and going at odd hours, but we'd always exchange friendly waves. Everything was perfect until Karen moved into the house next door. Now, our building sits on a corner lot. Behind us is the small parking area that serves our building exclusively. Next to us, separated by maybe 15 feet and a chain-link fence, is a single-family house. That house had been a rental for years, occupied by a quiet, elderly man who kept to himself. When he moved to a nursing home, the property was sold. Karen and her husband bought it. Within the first couple of weeks, I knew we had a problem. The first incident happened on a Saturday morning. I was carrying groceries from my car when Karen appeared at the fence line. She was probably in her mid-50s, wearing expensive athletic wear despite clearly not coming from any actual exercise, and had that particular expression I've come to recognize, the look of someone who's about to make your day significantly worse. She informed me that she'd noticed our parking lot was unkempt and that several vehicles were improperly parked. I looked at our lot. It was fine. A bit of gravel, sure, but maintained. And everyone parked in their designated spots like normal humans. I politely explained that it was private parking for our building and thanked her for her concern. She didn't seem to hear the dismissal in my tone. Instead, she launched into a speech about property values and neighborhood standards. I excused myself and went inside, figuring that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. Over the next several weeks, Karen appeared at random times to comment on various aspects of our building. The exterior paint color was dated. Our mailboxes were unsightly. Someone's potted plants on their balcony were inappropriate. Each time one of us would politely brush her off, and each time she'd act as if she had some kind of authority to demand changes. Then she started leaving notes on our cars. Printed notices that looked official, with headers that read "Community Standards Violation" in bold letters. The first one I found accused me of parking outside designated lines even though I was perfectly within my spot. Other residents found similar notes for increasingly ridiculous things. The older couple on the 1st floor got one claiming their welcome mat was a tripping hazard. The family with kids got one about their children's bikes being stored improperly near their own front door. It was absurd. We all laughed about it at first. Someone even made a joke about starting a collection to see who could get the most ridiculous violation notice. But Karen wasn't joking. She was deadly serious, and she was just getting started. One evening, I came home to find her in our parking lot taking photographs. When I asked what she was doing, she explained that she was documenting violations for the HOA records. I told her we didn't have an HOA. She smiled and said that we were part of the neighborhood association, whether we liked it or not, and that she'd recently been elected president. This was news to me. I did some digging and found out that years ago, several streets in our area had formed a voluntary neighborhood association. It was one of those things that existed mostly on paper, where people would organize an annual block party or coordinate on getting a stop sign installed. There were no mandatory fees, no enforcement power, and definitely no rules about what color you could paint your mailbox. But Karen had apparently decided this was her kingdom now. She'd gotten herself elected president at a meeting where approximately 6 people showed up, most of whom were her friends from her morning walking group. Now she was treating it like a legitimate HOA with actual authority. I explained to her again that our building was private property and not subject to any neighborhood association rules. She responded by handing me a packet of compliance guidelines she'd created. The thing was huge, had to be at least 15 or 20 pages of rules about everything from acceptable house colors to how many cars could be parked in a driveway to what type of outdoor furniture was permitted. I took the packet, thanked her, and promptly recycled it. But Karen escalated. She started showing up at our building multiple times a week, always with her clipboard and camera. She'd walk around our property line taking notes. She'd photograph our cars, our windows, our front doors. One resident caught her trying to peer into ground floor windows. We held an emergency meeting of all 8 unit owners. Everyone was fed up. The consensus was that we needed to firmly establish boundaries. We drafted a letter, signed by all 8 of us, explaining that our building was private property, we were not part of any HOA, and she needed to stop trespassing and harassing us. I delivered it personally, trying to be as diplomatic as possible. Karen read it, looked at me, and said that we were in violation of multiple community standards, and if we didn't come into compliance within 30 days, she'd be forced to take action. What action? She wouldn't say, but I was about to find out. A couple weeks later, I got a notice from the City Code Enforcement Office. Someone had filed a complaint about our building, claiming we had multiple violations: peeling paint, damaged gutters, unsafe balconies, and improperly stored trash. An inspector would be coming out to assess the property. The inspection happened on a weekday morning. The inspector walked around, checked everything, and found absolutely nothing wrong. Our building was well maintained. He seemed pretty annoyed at having his time wasted and said someone had filed a detailed complaint with photos, but he couldn't find any of the problems they'd reported. I knew exactly who had filed that complaint, but it didn't stop there. Over the following months, we received multiple city inspections for various fabricated complaints. The fire department showed up once because someone reported that we were blocking fire lanes. We weren't. Animal control came by because someone claimed we had aggressive dogs running loose. None of us even owned dogs. Each time the authorities found nothing wrong, but it was disruptive and stressful. Karen had figured out that she couldn't enforce her made-up rules directly, so she was weaponizing actual city departments against us. The final straw came when she filed a complaint with our utility company claiming we were stealing electricity through illegal connections. This resulted in them sending someone to physically inspect our electrical system, which meant coordinating access to every single unit and dealing with the hassle of having someone poke around in our homes. That's when I decided enough was enough. I called a meeting with all the unit owners. We needed to do something more than just tell her to stop. She clearly wasn't going to stop. We needed to make her stop. Someone suggested getting lawyers involved, but that would be expensive and time-consuming. Someone else suggested filing harassment charges with the police, but unless she was threatening us directly, that probably wouldn't go anywhere. Then the older gentleman from the first floor spoke up. He'd been quiet most of the meeting, but he remembered something from when he bought his unit years ago. He said there'd been some confusion about property lines during the original conversion, and he thought he still had paperwork about it somewhere. He suggested we should pull the actual property records and survey documents to see exactly where our boundaries were and what rights we had. This seemed like a good idea, so I volunteered to go to the county records office and get copies of everything. What I found changed everything. Our building's property didn't just include the structure and the parking lot. Due to how the original warehouse lot had been divided, we actually owned a 10-foot strip of land that ran along the entire side of our building, between us and Karen's property line. That chain-link fence she was always lurking behind, it was actually on our property. She'd been trespassing every single time she stood at that fence line to harass us, but it got better. When the warehouse was converted, certain utility easements had been established. The electrical transformer that served both our building and several neighboring properties, including Karen's house, sat on our property. We had legal rights to control access to our land, which technically meant we could restrict who walked on that 10-foot strip. I brought this information back to our group. We all stared at the survey documents and property maps. The retired engineer who lived on the first floor looked everything over carefully and confirmed it. That entire strip of land was definitely ours. One of the nurses who'd been dealing with Karen's harassment for months said we should put up a fence, a real fence, right on our actual property line, which would mean removing the chain link fence currently sitting on our land and replacing it with something more substantial. We all looked at each other. This could work. But before we could move forward with any fence plans, Karen gave us the perfect opportunity. She showed up one morning with a new demand. She'd apparently been studying property law online and had convinced herself she knew what she was talking about. She insisted that we needed to clearly mark our property boundaries because our unclear property lines were causing neighborhood confusion. She actually put this in writing and delivered copies to all 8 units. Her letter stated that property owners were required to clearly delineate boundaries to prevent disputes, and that we had 30 days to install clear property markers or boundary indicators at all property lines. I read that letter 3 times, then I started laughing. She was literally demanding that we mark our boundaries. She wanted clear property markers at our property lines. Okay, we could do that. We'd mark our boundaries real clear. We decided on a solid 6-foot privacy fence, the kind you can't see through, made of good wood with proper posts cemented in place. That would be a very clear property marker. Before we started construction, we did everything by the book. We pulled permits from the city. We notified all adjacent property owners of our plans, as required by local ordinance. We made sure every single legal requirement was met. We even included a copy of Karen's letter demanding clear boundary markers as part of our permit application, just for documentation purposes. We hired a surveyor to come out and mark our exact property boundaries with stakes. Then we hired a fencing company to give us quotes. Karen showed up the day the surveyor was out there marking boundaries. She was furious. She insisted the fence line was wrong, that we were encroaching on her property. The surveyor calmly showed her the legal documents and the measurements. She insisted he was mistaken. He assured her he was not. He'd been doing this for over 20 years, and these were the correct boundaries according to county records. She said she'd fight this. She said her neighborhood association had rules about fences, and we couldn't just put one up. I pulled out her letter and read it back to her. She wanted us to install clear boundary indicators at our property lines. We were complying with her demand. This was going to be a very clear boundary indicator. Her face went red. She said that wasn't what she meant. I told her that didn't really matter. She'd put it in writing and delivered it to all of us. We were just following her instructions. The fence went up over a long weekend. It was beautiful, solid, tall, and completely blocking her view of our parking area and most of our building. The fence company did excellent work, and we made sure they had all the proper permits posted. Karen was at our property line yelling before they'd even finished. She claimed we'd blocked her view, that this was illegal, that she'd report us to every authority she could think of. The fence company foreman just pointed to the permit posted on our building and kept working. The next day, Karen filed a complaint with the city about our fence. An inspector came out, checked the permit, measured the fence height, verified it was on our property, and apparently told her the fence was completely legal and properly installed. One of my neighbors watched the whole thing from their window. She filed another complaint claiming the fence was a fire hazard. Different inspector came out, same result. Legal and proper. She tried to claim the fence violated setback requirements. Another inspection, another confirmation that everything was fine and we had all the right permits. Remember how I mentioned that electrical transformer on our property? Well, it needed to be accessed periodically for maintenance. The utility company had an easement allowing them access, but the easement didn't extend to Karen or anyone else. Before the fence went up, Karen had been cutting through our property to access her back gate. She'd worn a little path through that 10-foot strip, and apparently she'd been doing it for years, since before she even bought the house. The previous owner had probably never cared or noticed. But now there was a fence right on our property line, which meant the only way to get from her driveway to her back gate was to walk all the way around her house the other direction. Added probably 2 minutes to her walk, such a tragedy. About a week after the fence was completed, I was working in my unit when I heard a commotion outside. I looked out to see Karen at our fence with some kind of pry bar or crowbar trying to force one of the panels off its posts. I called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, she'd managed to damage the fence but hadn't gotten the panel off. The officers looked at the damage, took both our statements, and looked at my survey documents. They told Karen she could be charged with criminal damage to property. One of them suggested we work it out between ourselves, but made it clear if I wanted to press charges, I could. I very politely said I wouldn't press charges this time, but the fence would be repaired at her expense, and if it happened again, I wouldn't be so generous. The officers seemed satisfied with that arrangement. She paid for the repairs. She didn't have much choice since the alternative was criminal charges and the officers had documented everything. But Karen still wasn't done trying. She showed up at our next annual unit owners meeting, uninvited, demanding to be heard. We told her this was a private meeting for unit owners only. She insisted that as president of the neighborhood association, she had a right to be there. The older gentleman from the first floor very calmly explained that no, she didn't. Our building's micro-association was a separate legal entity. She had no standing to participate. She argued for a bit. He just repeated himself in that patient way older people have when dealing with nonsense. Eventually she left, but not before threatening to sue all of us for harassment. The lawsuit never happened. Maybe her lawyer talked her out of it, or maybe she realized she'd just be throwing money away. Either way, we never heard anything more about it. What did happen was that other people in the neighborhood started paying attention to Karen's behavior. Turns out we weren't the only ones she'd been harassing. She'd been leaving her violation notices on cars up and down the street. She'd been filing complaints about people's landscaping choices. She'd been trying to dictate what decorations people could put up for holidays. Most people had been ignoring her, but a few had started to push back. And when word spread about how she'd tried to destroy our fence and how we'd successfully fought off all her harassment attempts, others started to feel empowered to stand up to her too. Someone filed a formal complaint with the actual neighborhood association, questioning whether Karen was acting appropriately as president. Turns out the association's founding documents said the president was supposed to be facilitating community connection, not enforcing made-up rules. There was nothing in the association's original charter about violations or fines or any of the things Karen had been trying to do. A special meeting was called. A lot more than 6 people showed up for this one. From what I heard through neighborhood talk, it got pretty heated. Karen was removed as president by a vote. The association was restructured to make it clear that it was purely voluntary and social, with no enforcement powers whatsoever. Just organizing block parties and maintaining the neighborhood email list, like it was supposed to be. Karen and her husband sold their house several months after our fence went up. I heard through the neighborhood that they were moving to an actual HOA-controlled community where Karen could be on the board and have the authority she'd been pretending to have with us. Good luck to those people, honestly. The new owners of that house are wonderful. Quiet, friendly, and with absolutely no interest in what we do with our property. They actually thanked us for the fence because it gives them privacy in their backyard too. We've had them over for drinks a couple times, total opposite of Karen in every way. Our building is back to being the peaceful, low-drama place it was before Karen moved in. We still have our annual pizza meetings to discuss building business. We still all get along great. The family with kids just had their 3rd baby. The traveling neighbor finally got a promotion that lets her work from home more. The nurses are talking about retiring in a few years. And we have a beautiful fence that we sometimes joke is our Karen memorial. Though honestly, we don't talk about her much anymore. She's just a weird chapter that's over now. The whole thing taught me that sometimes when someone demands you do something, the best response is to do exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. Karen demanded we install clear property boundary markers. So we did. With a 6-foot privacy fence that made it crystal clear where her authority ended, about 10 feet further from our building than she thought. She claimed she had authority over our building through her neighborhood association presidency. She put in writing that we needed to mark our boundaries. We complied. Boy, did we comply. I still live in my condo. I still love my building and my neighbors. And yeah, I still love that fence. Not just for the privacy, but for what it represents. That you can't bully people just because you gave yourself a fancy title and printed some official-looking papers. Best $375 I ever spent. That's my share of the fence cost, split 8 ways. Worth every penny. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Over 20 years ago, I changed an old-timer's computer screensaver. You probably remember the old screensavers that just had a word banner scrolling across the screen over and over. I worked in sales. There was an older guy named Bob. Bob was annoying. Maybe he annoyed me more because I was young, but honestly, he annoyed everyone. He was the kind of older coworker who would lie through his teeth to steal some of your commission. Because he had been around for a long time, he had more freedom with customers than the rest of us did, and it drove everyone crazy. For example, if a customer wanted to buy something but also wanted to use a coupon, Bob would sometimes disconnect the call or get rid of the customer in some other way. That meant the rest of us associates could not make the sale either. As a team, we could not hit our bonuses because of behavior like that. He did many things that drove people insane. He was a difficult coworker and frankly a bad employee. But he had been in the industry for a long time, so some of the managers favored him because they had history with him, whether at that company or others. He was just annoying in too many ways to list. I was young, did not care as much as I probably should have, and my understanding of workplace professionalism was very different back then. So one day I changed his screensaver to say, "Bob is a jackass." I had watched him type in his password. Then, when he left his desk, I went over and changed the screensaver. After that, the message scrolled across his screen over and over. At first, he did not notice. It looked similar enough to the usual "have a nice day" or whatever message had been scrolling before. The rest of us would giggle whenever we walked past and saw it. It was just funny. A day or so later, Bob was sitting in his cubicle chatting away when his screensaver must have activated. Suddenly, we heard him say, "What is this?" Then he read it. "Bob is a jackass. Who did this? This is defamation. Who did it?" The office started laughing. Bob was furious. He marched straight to a manager's desk and said, "Someone is defaming my name. This is workplace harassment. I want to know who did it." He eventually made it to human resources and even to the owner's office. At first, all we knew was that Bob had complained to the manager. The manager said, "Let's see," looked at the screensaver and started giggling too. Then he told Bob, "Come on, calm down, I'll change it." He did change it. Then he said, "Let's go take a walk and talk." Bob was not having it, but they walked off together. The rest of us went back to work and stopped thinking about it. About an hour or two later, a different manager said, "Hey, Mr. Johnson wants to see you upstairs." Cool, that was not unusual. He often called associates upstairs for customers, tasks, reviews, or whatever else. As soon as I walked into the office, Mr. Johnson said, "What the duck are you doing? Are you trying to get me sued? This guy is an absolute nightmare. Do you know he has sued that company and that company? Why would you do that? You know it is on the security camera, right? You use someone else's password. You are not supposed to use or share passwords, ever." I said, "It was a joke." None of us thought it was that big of a deal. We share passwords all the time so we can get the information we need. We are all on the same team. He replied, "That is a policy violation. That is it. You better hope I can keep him from turning this into a bigger issue. Go home for the next 3 days. You are suspended. Get out of my office and get out of my building now." So I left. I walked out the back door, down the back stairs, got into my car, and drove away. This was a Wednesday, so that meant I suddenly had a 5-day weekend. Hell yes, I was thrilled. As I reached my car, I heard someone yelling, "Hey, James! James! Peggy wants to see you!" Peggy was the human resources lady. I ignored it, backed out, and drove away in the opposite direction. 15 minutes later, my phone started ringing. I was not answering, absolutely not. Those were the days when cell phone minutes were expensive. When I got home, I told my wife, "We have a 5-day weekend." It was barely noon. We decided to head to the beach about 3.5 hours away. We were excited. About an hour later, my phone kept ringing over and over. My wife told me to just answer it, so I did. "Hey, James, this is Peggy. I need you to sign some forms regarding your 3-day suspension." "Sorry, Peggy. I was told to leave, so I left. I am now out of town. I will have to sign them another time." She was not thrilled, but there was not much she could do. A moment later, another call came in. It was my direct supervisor. "James, where are you? We need the numbers put together for this client coming in today, and you had the presentation stored on your computer. We also need this and that. Where are you?" "Mr. Johnson sent me home for messing with Bob's screensaver." "Nobody told me. Why didn't you come down and tell me? Come back and give me the reports and send the files to me." "Sorry, I was told to leave the building immediately. I have already left town. I am over an hour away and I will not be turning around." "Then give me your password." "I cannot do that either. I was told not to share passwords." "Sorry, sir, but my phone minutes are being used, and I cannot talk much longer. I do not know what to tell you. Mr. Johnson sent me home, told me to leave, and told me not to share passwords. I am about to go through the coastal hills and lose reception. Be here first thing tomorrow morning. We need to keep these projects moving." "Well, sir, I will not be back until Monday. I was told to leave for 3 days." "You have to be kidding. He did not mean 3 days. I will talk with him." I turned my phone off. Back then, turning off your phone was not like turning off a modern smartphone. It was no big deal. On Sunday, I finally listened to my messages. My manager had left one saying that Mr. Johnson had not realized we had active projects I was leading and wanted me to come back the next day. Then there was another message saying Mr. Johnson had approved me giving my password to my manager just this one time. But Mr. Johnson had told me to leave, so I left. He said no sharing passwords, so I did not share my password. He said 3 days, so I took 3 days. For a company that almost never gave time off, it was wonderful to have a long weekend. When I came back to work on Monday, nothing really happened. That business was chaotic enough that by then, it was not a big deal. They either made the deal, did not make the deal, or postponed it. It was no longer my problem. They worked up new reports and half-assed presentations without me. Everything went back to normal. I was not in trouble anymore. I had served my suspension, enjoyed my extra days off, and returned to work on Monday to keep selling. And in sales, problems tend to disappear if you sell something. The next one is an entitled people story. I am a 34-year-old woman living in an accessory dwelling unit. I pay rent, have my own utility meter, and pay my own bills. There is a duplex in front of my unit. The neighbors I am talking about live in the upstairs half of that duplex. They are not above me. Their unit is completely separate and sits around 40 to 45 feet away. Here are some of the things they do that I consider extremely entitled. They keep a pile of junk stacked against my bedroom window. They never asked permission to put it there. I lived here before they did. They moved in about a year ago, while I have been here for 4 years. They constantly use the side of my house as storage, even though there is plenty of room elsewhere. They simply dumped everything there one day because they are a-holes. I know that asking him to move it would not go well. He is not the kind of man who listens to women, and our landlord would not care. The pile attracts every bug imaginable, and they come through my bedroom window. There are bees because some of the junk includes bamboo, as well as carpenter ants, termites, and enormous spiders. There are also large metal poles stacked there. Rats, raccoons, opossums, birds, and cats climb all over the equipment. Since it is pressed against my window, the noise wakes me up at night. I can provide photographs too. They also always clean things directly in front of my kitchen window, which faces the shared yard. I mean, always. He cleans his tent there, along with random items and workout equipment. The yard is shared, but it is huge. He has plenty of room to do this near his own stairs, but for some reason he insists on standing directly outside my window. We also have a gazebo with concrete seating where he could place things to dry. I hate when he stands in front of my window because he can see inside my home. After cleaning his things, he often spreads them over my outdoor chairs, which sit against the wall of my unit. He owns his own chairs and has a large grill he could use instead, but no, he has to use mine. I assume he does not want to get his own chairs wet. Once he covers mine, I cannot sit in them. Sometimes I have gone outside and asked very politely what he is doing. He ignores me completely. He acts as though I am invisible. I usually laugh it off because what else can I do? He is not wearing headphones, and he is not deaf. He is simply a prick. They also use my outdoor lights without asking. Those lights plug directly into my unit. We have separate meters, so I am the one paying for the electricity. I am usually a confrontational person, but these people are so unpleasant that I do not want to deal with them. He is the kind of person who responds to a simple question with a long speech filled with unnecessary big boy words. I know for a fact that telling him not to use my lights would turn into an argument. Even if I simply unplugged them, he seems like the type who would plug them back in without asking. My biggest issue, however, is that they look inside my house through my windows. I do not mean a glance from across the yard. I mean they lean directly into my window and stare around my kitchen and living room for a full minute, with their faces practically pressed against the screen. They do this when showing guests the yard and other parts of the property. One time I waved at them from inside as if to say, "Hello?" They looked at me like they were confused about why I was standing inside my own home. They are so weird. I have curtains and one of those peel and stick privacy films on the glass so people cannot normally see through it. However, I enjoy fresh air and sometimes leave the window open. There is more than enough room in the yard for them to stand somewhere other than directly outside my windows. It is incredibly strange and creepy. Another thing they do is shut the gate in my face. Sometimes I return from walking my dog at the same time they are entering. Even when I am only a couple of steps behind them, they close the gate directly in front of me. That does not hurt my feelings. I do not expect them to hold it open for me, but I am sometimes only an arm's length behind them. They see me and still deliberately shut it. The gate can be clicked into an open position, so there is no reason to slam it closed. One day I did the same thing to him as payback. Ha! I only did it once because I felt bad afterward. The worst incident happened when he was outside with a friend, looking around the yard. He looked through my bedroom window where a standing mirror is visible. I genuinely did not see or hear him, and I was changing into a bikini. When I stepped in front of the mirror to tie it, he saw me naked. He did not look away. He stared at me with an expression that basically said, "Ooh la la." So yes, I just wanted to share this. I know everyone has unpleasant things they have to deal with, but it feels good to write it all down and post it somewhere. I avoid these people and do not engage with them, but wow, are they entitled. Also, he wears shirts that would be too small for me, and I wear an extra small. Anyway, thank you for watching.